All right, and this video is going to be for lesson 3-4, part A, which is going to be dealing with dividing polynomials. But before we do that, I want to review how to multiply polynomials, and there's a purpose for this. So I want you to look at this warm-up example that I have here, where we have 2x plus 3 times a quantity, 4x squared minus 6x plus 9. Remember the process that we used for that we learned about in lesson 3-2 was to use that box method. So I want you to set up a box, a 2x3 grid, multiply these together and get your answer. So pause the video and hit play when you're ready to check to see if you've done this warm-up correctly. All right, let's see how you did. So when you multiply those together, again, you set up a 2x3 grid like I did in purple there, and you multiply the outside pieces to get the inside pieces, which are in red, and you get 8x cubed. Remember your diagonals where we have 12x squared and negative 12x squared, those are like terms. And our other diagonals, negative 18x and 18x, those are like terms, and those cancel out to be 0. So our answer would just be 8x cubed plus 27. Now we're going to come back to why this is so important. But first, let's look at this other example. So if I had 3 times something, so if I had basically like a factor of 3, another factor of x, and I'm multiplying those together, and I want to figure out what they would multiply together to be to get my answer 27. We know that the process that we would do here is we would divide both sides by 3. In other words, to find x, I would take 27 divided by 3, and when we do that, we get 9 as our answer. So 3 times 9 is 27. I know that seems really basic, but anytime we do something complicated in math, it can usually be tied back into something basic that you have already mastered and understand, which is true of what we're doing today. So today we're going to see problems like this, where we have x cubed plus 5x squared plus 6x plus 9 divided by x plus 3. We're going to divide those using the box method. Now we're actually going to end by, this problem here is actually going to be the last problem that we do. We're actually going to start over here with this one. Okay, so we're going to call this problem number 1. Now, we're dividing these. We're taking 8x cubed plus 27 and dividing that by 2x plus 3. Or in essence, we're trying to figure out what would I multiply 2x plus 3 by that would give us our answer of 8x cubed plus 27. And we're going to do that by using the box method. Now the problem is when we're dividing, we have no idea how big to make the box because I don't know what's going to go up here. That's what we need to figure out. So I don't know how many terms it's going to have. So sometimes we'll set up a box and we might need to add some extra squares. Sometimes there might be squares that we don't use. But what I do know is I know this factor here. So I know I'm going to put that over here as 2x plus 3. And I know our answer is supposed to be x cubed, or 8x cubed plus 27. Well, remember, anytime we multiply these together, this one here is always going to be, we're never going to have a like term. So remember, our like terms are usually going to be these boxes and these boxes. And we never have an a common, another factor in that top left corner. So I already know that first value is going to be 8x cubed. Okay, now let's think about that for a second. What would I multiply 2x by that would give me 8x cubed? Well, that'd be 4x squared. Because 4 times 2 is 8, x squared times x is x cubed. And so now I can use what I just found there to multiply times the 3 down here. So we can fill in this column. So 4x squared times 2x is 8x cubed. So let's again fill out the column. 4x squared times 3 would be 12x squared. So remember, that diagonal is going to add up to be my squared term. Well, look at my original problem. My original problem is 8x cubed plus 27. I don't have a squared term. So that means that these two have to cancel each other out. So those like terms have to add together to be 0. So what does this have to be? That means this has to be negative 12x squared, because negative 12x squared plus 12x squared would be 0. So now we can figure out what would go here. What times 2x would give me negative 12x squared? I have to multiply to be a negative, so it's going to be a negative number. And 6 times 2 would be 12. So negative 6 times 2 would be negative 12. and x times x would be x squared. So this has to be a negative 6x. So let's fill in the column. So if I take negative 6x times 3, that's negative 18x. So remember, what that diagonal, the other blue square, is going to have to add up to be whatever our x term is here. We don't have an x term, so that's also going to end up being 0. So this one's a unique problem because, again, there's no x's. So 18x plus negative 18x would be 0. So far, so good. So now we want to figure out what goes here. So we figure that out. We go back to this 2x to try to figure out what times 2x would give us 18x. Well, that would just be 9. So 9 times 2x is 18x. 9 times 3 is 27. So look what we have here. That 27 is the same value that we have there. So that means, let me erase my little circle piece here. Let me erase some things up here. So the missing factor was 4x squared minus 6x plus 9. And if you multiply those together, that's what the outside factors gives us the inside squares, and those, sure enough, do multiply together to be 8x cubed plus 27, which, if you notice, whoops, that was the warm-up that we did. Okay, so that's the connection here. So if we wanted to figure out what this factor would be, we could take 8x cubed plus 27 divided by 2x plus 3, so put the 2x plus 3 here, figure out for the boxes, figure out what goes on the outside that would give us those inside pieces. Essentially the process that we're doing. So let's go down here. Let's look at letter C. Let's do this one next. So here, again, we're dividing. So this is going to be the outside piece. This time we're going to have a 3 by something grid. Excuse me. I have no idea how big to make this grid, but what I do know is that on the outside we're going to take and start with this x squared minus 4x plus 3. Now I always like to rewrite the numerator down here, x cubed minus 6x squared plus 11x minus 6. All right, so remember what value this is that goes in that first grid, and that helps us get started. All right, so what would I multiply x squared by to get x cubed? Well, that would just be x, because x times x squared would be x cubed. And now let's fill it in. So x, or fill out that column. So x times negative 4x, that's going to be negative 4x squared. X times 3, or 3 times x, would just be 3x. All right, so remember, these two have to add together to be my x squared term. So what would I add to negative 4x squared to get negative 6x? Well, that would have to be negative 6x squared. So that'd have to be negative 2x squared. So when you combine those together, we sure enough do get negative 6x squared. So now let's figure out what goes here. So what would I multiply x squared by to get negative 2x squared? Oops, let me use purple. So that'd just be negative 2. So negative 2 times x squared, sure enough, is negative 2x squared. Now let's fill in this column. Negative 2 times negative 4x, well, that's going to be a positive 8x. Negative 2 times 3 is going to be negative 6. So let's look at our diagonals. So this diagonal would be my x's. And if we add those two together, we already get what we need. We get 11x. And notice, that's already what we have there. So we have everything we need. So this divides evenly. So our answer would be x minus 2. Or another way to think of it is if we took x minus 2 times x squared minus 4x plus 3, that would give us our numerator. So basically, we just factored the numerator is another way that we could look at this. But the actual answer, all we're looking for is what's the answer when we divide these two? Your answer is just x minus 2. All right, let's do one more together because it's not always going to work out where they divide evenly. Sometimes we can have what's called a remainder. I'll show you how to identify a remainder. So first off, we're going to put this on the outside. 4x squared plus 9. I have no idea how big to make the box, but I know we have 16 x to the fourth minus 85. So I am going to put this in that first box, 16x to the fourth. Let's think, what would we multiply 4x squared by to get 16x to the fourth? So start with the numbers. 4 times 4 is 16, and x squared times x squared is x to the fourth. So now let's fill in the column. 4x squared times 9 would be 36x squared. So that means these two boxes are going to add together to be my x squared term. Notice how we don't have an x squared term, so that means we don't want those. We want those to add up to be 0. So that'd have to be a negative 36x squared. So make sure the terms are the same. So that's really important. So they're both x squareds. All right, now I just got to figure out what would I multiply 4x squared by to get negative 36x squared, and that's just negative 9. Negative 9 times 4 would be negative 36, so we'd get negative 36x squared. And 9 times negative 9 is negative 81. So these would have to get, now notice what my answer here does not equal negative 85. So, and also if you notice up here, I've run out of terms. I have 4x squared and then I have my constant. So this is going to be my remainder. So my remainder is going to be whatever we need to still combine to be negative 85. So negative 81 and a negative 4, those would combine to be negative 85. So my remainder is negative 4. So the way that we'll write our answer, we'll write our answer to say our answer is going to be 4x squared minus 9. Now the remainder is negative 4, so I'm going to say plus negative 4 over 4x squared plus 9. Or we could say the r equals negative 4. So I would accept either one of those as your answer on the test. Savas, your computer program, when you're doing your assignment. I don't know how they're going to want to write your answer, so they might have you write your answer as a fraction, in which case you just take whatever you're dividing by, and that goes in the denominator with your remainder up on top. All right, so I want you now to go back and do this problem on your own. So do your best with it. So I will help you get it set up. If you struggle with that, again, we have no idea how big to make our grid. So the x cubed plus 5x squared plus 6x plus 9 is our goal. Remember this goes right there. So there's a start. Why don't you guys go ahead and pause the video now and try to finish the rest of this. I will give you a hint though. This one does end up with needing a remainder. So attempt this one. Go ahead and work this one on your own. So pause the video and hit play when you're ready to check your answer. All right, instead of just having the answer here for you, I am going to go through it now with you in case you struggled. All right, so we got the x cubed there. So what would we multiply x by to get x cubed? That's going to be x squared. Go ahead and fill out the column. So 3 times x squared would be 3x squared. So that tells me that this box and this box have to add together to be my x squared term, which we do have there. So that tells me that this has to be a 2x squared. So what would we multiply x by to get 2x squared? Well, that would be, go back to using purple. So that would be 2x. So x times 2x is 2x squared. 3 times 2x is 6x. So that means this one and this one have together add together to be 6x. Well, this one's a little bit different. What would we have to add together to be 6x for it to stay, or what would I have to add to 6x for it to stay 6x? That would be 0x. So what would I multiply x by to get 0x? It'd be 0. So 0 times x would be 0x, 0 times 3 would be 0. Let's use this as another color. All right, so we would need to have a remainder column here. And so I have 0, and I have to figure out what plus 9 would give me 0. Well, that would have to be 9. So 0 plus 9 is 9. So I have a remainder of 9 here. So how would I write our answer? So if you struggled with this last part, here's how you'd write your answer. So our answer would be, I'll write it up here. It would be x squared plus 2x. If you wanted to say plus 0, you could. And then a remainder is 9. So we'd have 9 over x plus 3. That's the best way to write it. Or if you just said the remainder would equal 9, that would also be fine. But again, I do like this as my best form to put the answer. But otherwise, either answer would be correct. All right. So hopefully you got an understanding of how to do this. And good luck then on your assignment.